have been here as you've been announcing your economic team, we've learned that House Democrats are currently planning to introduce articles of impeachment against President Trump as soon as Monday. At that point, it'll be just a little over a week before the president leaves office. Do you believe this is a good idea?
Look, I've thought for a long, long time that President Trump wasn't fit to hold the job. That's why I ran. And my job now, in 12 days, God willing, I'll be President of the United States of America. And I'm focused on the urgency of three immediate concerns. One, the virus, getting it under control, getting the vaccine from a vial into people's arms. I think the way it's being done now has been very, very sad. Number two, we've had 4,000 deaths. 4,000 deaths yesterday. And things continue to rise, to escalate. That's my number one concern, to get the virus under control. We lost over 125,000 jobs this last month, and people are really, really, really in desperate shape. And so I'm focused on the virus, the vaccine, and economic growth. What the Congress decides to do is for them to decide. But I'm going to have to, and they're going to have to be ready to hit the ground running, because when Kamala and I are sworn in, we're going to be introducing immediately significant pieces of legislation to deal with the virus, deal with the economy, and deal with economic growth. So we're going to do our job, and the Congress can decide how to proceed with theirs.
But if a Democratic member of Congress were to call and ask for your advice about whether they should proceed with this, what would you tell them?
I'd tell them that's a decision for the Congress to make. I'm focused on my job.
And did you speak with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi before this decision was made, or is that conversation that's still going to happen?
I'll be speaking with Nancy and the Democratic leadership this afternoon, as a matter of fact, about my agenda, as well as whatever they want to talk to me about.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mr. President-elect.
Thank you, Ken.
I wanted to ask you about your agenda in light of the jobs report that came out today. You're going to be laying out the principles of your plan. Do you think the need in the COVID relief bill is greater than you anticipated? And what is the price tag that you're looking at? I've been told it could be in the $2 to $3 trillion range. And then as it relates to the direct cash payments, you've talked about the need for $2,000 checks. Do you want to see that in a Senate standalone bill as a way to speed up the process? Or do you think those direct cash payments should be part of the package that you're going to be proposing?
Well, we're going to be proposing an entire package. And parts of that package are of equal consequence to people. Unemployment insurance, being able to continue with rent forbearance, the whole range of issues. So that's number one. We think that they all have to be dealt with. The price tag will be high. But as I said, made scant reference to in my opening comments, the overwhelming consensus among the leading economists, left, right, and center, is that in order to keep the economy from collapsing this year and getting much, much worse, we should be investing significant amounts of money right now to grow the economy. And that's a pretty wide consensus. And as you know, Moody's had done an analysis of what I originally had been talking about and said that it was necessary to keep the economy from going down. It would rise, we'd create 18.6 million jobs, create $2 trillion more in economic growth than the other administration would, this outgoing administration. So it is necessary to spend the money now. The answer is yes, it will be in the trillions of dollars, the entire package. But it will be, I'll be here next Thursday laying out in detail how that package is going to go. But the basic story is simple, that if we don't act now, things are going to get much worse and harder to get out of the hole later. So we have to invest now. Secondly, we're going to have to meet the emergency needs of the American people. I mean, literally, I know you know this, Ken, that people are having trouble just putting food on the table, just having to keep the payment of their car, maybe even able to turn the lights on. There's a dire, dire need to act now, purely out of what is a humanitarian need here at home. And thirdly, we're going to, in the third stage of this, the whole story is we're going to have to invest, as I suggested throughout the campaign, in infrastructure, in healthcare, and a whole range of things that are going to generate good paying jobs that will allow us to grow the economy. So that's a long answer to a short question, which is that the idea of, with interest rates as low as they are, with the Fed having had its power sort of taken away in terms of what they could do to help this administration like last, it's important across the board. Every major economist thinks we should be investing in deficit spending in order to generate economic growth.
And I wanted to ask you about what took place at the Capitol this week. You served in the Senate for 36 years, and importantly, you were there in 1983 when there was an explosion in a Senate quarter. You were there in 1998 when 2 Capitol police officers were shot. You were there during the anthrax attacks in 2001. What kind of an investigation needs to take place, and what steps need to take place to improve the security of the Capitol? And then secondly, how do you think the people who were involved in the storming of the Capitol, how should they be treated by your Justice Department? Should they be treated as domestic terrorists?
Yes, they should be treated as they're a bunch of thugs, insurrectionists, white supremacists, anti-Semites. 6N is not enough. I mean, come on. You know, these shirts they're wearing, these are a bunch of thugs. And they're terrorists, domestic terrorists. And that'll be a judgment for the Justice Department to make as to what the charges should be. But the fact is, they should be prosecuted. They should be prosecuted. The difference here is, this had the active encouragement of a sitting president of the United States. And the way in which the breakdown in security occurred needs to be thoroughly investigated. I'm not going to prejudge what it was, but the idea that these people were able to just march up the stairs, march in, and do it in the way we had, there's a great debate. I don't know the answer. Great debate now. Was the governor of Maryland correct when he said that I was ready to send in the National Guard? I couldn't get authorization. What happened? It deserves a full-blown investigation. People be held accountable, and steps taken that something like this could never happen again. And the difference this time is every nation has dealt, every democracy has dealt with individual terrorist attacks by groups that are very targeted. The largest target was 9/11 and the buildings. Well, right down to blowing up, you know, a bomb going off in the Capitol when I was there, 2 policemen. But the idea that thousands of people could be marching up the steps of the United States Capitol, breaking windows, breaking doors, forcing their way in, stepping aside. And the photographs of, well, I don't know what the circumstances, the photograph looked like you had some of the Capitol Police taking selfies with these people. That has to be thoroughly investigated. The authorities responsible have to be held accountable for the failures that occurred, and we have to make sure that this can never, ever happen again. The damage done to our reputation around the world by a president of the United States encouraging a mob. This reminded me more of states I've visited over the 100 countries I've gone to, in third tin horn dictatorships. It just cannot be sustained, has to be immediately investigated in depth, and people have to be held accountable.
And lastly, do you think you need to change any of the planning for your inauguration as a result of this?
A totally different entity is in charge of the inauguration that was in charge of protecting the Capitol, the Secret Service. I have great confidence in the Secret Service. I have great confidence in their ability to make sure that the inauguration goes off safely, and goes off without a hitch. So it's a different, so I have confidence in what is going in the planning that's been underway before this and continues with the Secret Service as the lead agency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President-elect Biden, Vice President-elect Harris, good to see you both. I want to pick up on something that you just said about President Trump actively encouraging the insurrection at the Capitol. Given the perceived threat that he poses, my question to you is not so much about the role that Congress should play in impeachment, but rather, should President Trump, in your estimation, remain in office?
I didn't think, look, I've been saying for now well over a year, he is not fit to serve. He is not fit to serve. He's one of the most incompetent presidents in the history of the United States of America. And so the idea that I think he shouldn't be out of office yesterday is not the issue. The question is, what happens with 14 days left to go or 13 days left to go? And I think that what 81 million people stood up and said, it's time for him to go. And the United States Senate voted 93-6 to confirm that we should be sworn in. We were duly elected. So I think it's important we get on with the business, getting him out of office. The quickest way that that will happen is us being sworn in on the 20th. What action happens before or after that is a judgment for the Congress to make, but that's what I am looking forward to, him leaving office. I was told that on the way up here, way over here, that he indicated he wasn't going to show up at the inauguration. One of the few things he and I have ever agreed on. It's a good thing I'm not showing up.
Earlier, you'd said that if you'd hope that he would show up only in the sense that it was valuable to send a signal to the world about the transfer of power. You've clearly changed your perspective on that.
Because he has clearly demonstrated, he's exceeded even my worst notions about him. He's been an embarrassment to the country, embarrassed us around the world, not worthy to hold that office. If we were 6 months out, we should be moving everything to get him out of office, impeaching him again, trying to invoke the 25th Amendment, whatever it took to get him out of office. But I am focused now on us taking control as president and vice president on the 20th and to get our agenda moving as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Another question about holding public officials to account, and this is about an issue that's no longer a headline but is no less significant and serious, and it's about the more than 600 children who were orphaned under the Trump administration as a result of the family separation policy along the border. During the campaign, you said that practice was criminal. Will you commit to making sure that the Trump administration officials responsible for that policy will be held to account?
I'll commit that our Justice Department and our investigative arms will make judgments about who is responsible, how they're responsible, and whether or not the conduct is criminal across the board. But as I said yesterday, I am not going to tell the Justice Department who they should prosecute and who they should not. That's a judgment that will be made by the Attorney General of the United States of America, not influenced by me. But there will be a thorough investigation of who's responsible and whether or not the responsibility is criminal. And if that is concluded, the Attorney General will make that judgment. I will not intervene to tell him who he should or shouldn't indict or if he should indict.
And lastly, beyond the COVID plan, which you've detailed, what are your legislative priorities? You've talked about infrastructure. You've talked about introducing an immigration bill. After January 20th, Democrats will control the House and the Senate. What do you do first?
Three different issues there in that same question. One, the commitments I made that what I would introduce, not necessarily we would move to, but introduce in the United States Congress first, I will do. I will introduce an immigration bill immediately and have it sent to the appropriate committees to begin movement. I will, in fact, countermand executive orders that the president has, in fact, initiated that are contrary to what I think is either his authority and/or, even if it's his authority, contrary to the interests of the United States on environmental issues and a whole range of other things. And thirdly, I will immediately move, though, to the most urgent need of asking the Congress to give me the financial wherewithal to deal with the virus, to be able to move so that we have Operation Warp Speed really working. Warp Speed got the vaccine to places that were delivered, but did not get them from those vials into people's arms. And so it is a gigantic logistical concern of how we do that. I'm committed to get 100 million shots in people's arms in the first 100 days. I'm committed to insisting that on all federal jurisdictions, any place I have control as president, everyone will be mandated to wear a mask in interstate transportation as well as federal facilities. And thirdly, I'm committed to moving as rapidly as possible to get the vaccine to teachers and the material to children that can provide for the safe opening of our schools at the end of that, beginning at the end of that 100 days. They're the most urgent things we have to do now, immediately upon getting office. There's going to be multiple things, as you well know, because you're a seasoned veteran of how this policy, how we work, and that is that there will be other committees will be holding hearings on a whole range of issues, from my positions on infrastructure, what we should be doing to generate a green economy, and so on. But in terms of the immediate need to get done, not just introduced, but to get done, voted on, and get the money and resources to do it, it turns out that the most urgent need is dealing with the virus, number one, and economic relief to Americans who, through no fault of their own, are really getting battered. Thank you both.
Thank you, Mr. President-elect and Madam Vice President-elect. I want to follow up with respect to what you just said about the inauguration and that it's a good thing that the president is not coming. But what about the Vice President, Mike Pence?
He's welcome. I think it's important that as much as we can stick to what have been the historical precedents of how, in the circumstance in which an administration changes, should be maintained. And so if the Vice President is welcome to come, we'd be honored to have him there and to move forward in the transition.
Have you spoken to him at all?
No, I haven't.
And you have called for unity and healing in this country, but after the events of Wednesday, does that make your job easier or harder?
I think it makes my job easier, quite frankly. I've had a number of my Republican colleagues, former colleagues, I used to serve in the Senate for a long time, call me. Many of them are as outraged and disappointed and embarrassed and mortified by the president's conduct as I am and Democrats are. And I think I have said from the beginning, and I have not changed my view, my overarching objective is to unify this country. We must unify the country. And I think that you've heard me say this before, and I apologize for repeating myself, but understandably the questions are repetitive and good. I mean, I'm not being critical of the question. And that is that there's two ways people are inspired: by inspirational leaders and by terrible leaders. By terrible leaders. What this president has done is rip the Band-Aid all the way off to let the country know who he is and what he's about and how thoroughly unfit for office he is. And you see already a number of Republicans. I was so proud. I know we're on opposite sides. I'll get criticized from some of the people in my party for saying this, but I've worked very hard with and against the former, soon-to-be former Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. I thought what he said on the floor of the United States Senate was, in fact, the right thing to do. He stood up. He's ashamed. I spoke with a guy I have enormous respect for, and I ran against him Mitt Romney. I spoke to Mitt this morning again. This is a man of enormous integrity, who lives his faith. There are so many more, but there's others who should be ashamed of themselves. But they make up a minority of the Republican Party. This isn't about Republican, Democrat anymore. This is about people who understand what this country's about and the things we have to agree on and move together on. I just think that if you look at it, speaking to some of my Republican colleagues, and I've spoken to a number of them over the last month since we've been elected, through recently as the day in which this god-awful debacle was taking place up on the Hill. And I think they understand that they're going to have to, we need a Republican Party. We need an opposition that's principled and strong. And I think you're going to see them going through this idea of what constitutes a Republican Party. And to hear some of my colleagues, Republican colleagues, talk about how shameful it is of the way Ted Cruz and others are dealing with this, how they're responsible as well for what happened.
Do you think some of them should resign? Should Senator Cruz or Senator Hawley resign?
I think they should be just flat beaten the next time they run. I think the American public has a real good, clear look at who they are. They're part of the big lie. The big lie. I was being reminded by a friend of mine, and maybe you were with me, I can't recall, when we were told that, Goebbels in The Great Lie, you keep repeating the lie, repeating the lie. Well, there was a print that when Dresden was bombed, firebombed, there were 250 people that were killed, or was it 2,500 people were killed? And Goebbels said, no, 25,000 or 250,000 were killed. And our papers printed that. Our papers printed it. It's the big lie. People will know it's one thing for one man, one woman, to repeat the lie over and over and over again. By the way, Trump said that before he ran. If you say it enough, I'm going to convince you. I'll say it enough. The press is bad, the press is bad, the press is bad, the press is bad. If he's the only one saying it, that's one thing. But the acolytes that follow him, like Cruz and others, they are as responsible as he is. And so it's not about whether or not they get impeached. It's about whether or not they can continue to hold power because of the disgust the American people have for their actions. There are decent people out there who actually believe these lies because they've heard it again and again. I was with a friend of mine who's a medical doctor telling me that his neighbor said to him, he lives in another state, his neighbor's a good person, said, but doc, this is true. There's a lot of chicanery that went on in this election. He said, tell me what? Well, I just know there was. They say it is. They say it is. This is a human condition. You say it and say it and say it and say it. The degree to which it becomes corrosive is in direct proportion to the number of people who say it. And so it's interesting to me, and I was pleased to hear some of the more prominent Republicans say to me that the Ted Cruzes of the world are as responsible in terms of people believing the lies as, not as responsible, but similarly responsible like Trump. But they didn't say, go to the Capitol, I'll be with you, follow. That's a different story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very, very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All the available doses. Can you guarantee that everybody can get their second shot on time?
The answer is I'll be talking about that on Friday.
On Friday?
Thursday.
On Thursday?